Let's talk about the International Criminal Court and why the US is going after it. The ICC is investigating whether war crimes were committed in Afghanistan. Not just by the Taliban and Afghan forces, but by the US military too. US President Donald Trump responded by imposing sanctions on ICC prosecutors.
We cannot, we will not stand by as our people are threatened by a kangaroo court.
So why is the US lashing out at the ICC? What happened in Afghanistan? And what, if anything, has Israel got to do with any of this? Let's get our heads around this business of international justice. The ICC is there to hold the most powerful people accountable for the most serious of crimes. It's about providing millions of victims with access to justice if the country in question is unable or unwilling to seek it for them. That's why it's considered the court of last resort. It's people like the Rohingya Muslims. They were forced to flee a military crackdown in Myanmar. There's also the Yazidis in northern Iraq, brutalized and enslaved by Islamic State fighters, and the people of Darfur in Sudan, who say they were subjected to a campaign of terror by a government-backed militia. The ICC was created in 1998 by a treaty called the Rome Statute. Most countries in the world have signed onto it, and the court works like most courts. The prosecutor builds a case and takes it to trial, and the accused has the right to appeal. Now, a person can be investigated if they're accused of committing crimes in any of the 123 member countries. Afghanistan is one of them. Prosecutors can also investigate people from countries that aren't signed up to the ICC, like the US. That's why Americans are being investigated for what happened in Afghanistan. The UN Security Council can also refer cases to the court, like they did with Darfur, even though Sudan isn't a member.
Now, the United States, of course, is not a state party to the Rome Statute, and that is completely their decision. That's their sovereign right. But it doesn't exempt United States citizens from ICC jurisdiction when crimes are committed on the territory of the state party.
Among other places, the ICC is now looking into atrocities in Afghanistan. The case is focused on events after 2003 and alleged crimes by all sides. Let's start with the Taliban. In 2001, the Taliban was in power. They were seen as an oppressive regime that refused to hand over Osama bin Laden. After the September 11 attacks, the US went into Afghanistan to push them out. By 2003, a new Afghan government was in place, and the US and NATO had control of the military. But Taliban fighters didn't go away. They and other militant groups went on to wage a guerrilla war, not only targeting Afghan forces and their NATO allies, but civilians too. And the violence hasn't stopped. There are attacks nearly every day in many parts of Afghanistan. The ICC is also looking at Afghan forces and whether they committed war crimes. On the list of accusations, torture and sexual abuse of detainees. The court has its sights on people like General Abdul Rashid Dostum, who until recently was Afghanistan's vice president. During the war, he led a pro-government militia whose fighters are accused of atrocities like killing and burying thousands of Taliban prisoners in mass graves. At the time, his militia was backed by US Special Forces. That's them riding with General Dostum's men. Which brings us to the United States and what it stands accused of. For nearly 13 years, Americans were the major foreign power in Afghanistan, leading an international coalition that at one point in 2010 reached 150,000 foreign soldiers. US Special Forces were mainly there to support the Afghan government, but they're accused of crimes including the abuse of prisoners and covering up killings.
We are talking about US forces in Maidan Wardak. They were abducting people, torturing them, killing them, disposing their bodies, keeping their body parts as trophies. During the night raids, the US Special Forces stormed in a place where they are celebrating the birth of a child in Gardis province. And they try to cover it up, deduct bullets out of the bodies of the dead.
The CIA is also being investigated for its use of torture.
Gul was beaten and doused in cold water by CIA interrogators. He was left chained to the floor of his cell, half naked. In the morning, Gul Rahman was found dead.
So the prosecutor's office at the ICC gathered all of this evidence on Afghanistan and finally got the green light in March to go ahead. And then President Donald Trump imposed sanctions, something the US usually reserves for rogue nations and human rights abusers. They include travel bans and asset freezes against the office of the prosecutor.
The United States seems to be afraid of the ICC because if you're not afraid of something, why take such an extreme reaction against it?
But resisting the ICC's jurisdiction seems to have been US policy from the beginning. The Clinton administration only reluctantly signed the Rome Statute, and 2 years later, President George W. Bush withdrew from it.
As the United States works to bring peace around the world, our diplomats and or soldiers can be dragged into this court. That's very troubling to me.
The US then took more steps to protect itself. In 2002, during the Bush era, they passed a law that allows the US to ignore the ICC. It even authorizes the use of military force to free US nationals detained by or on behalf of the court. And yet, the US has been known to cooperate with the ICC.
Let's not forget that Dominic Ongwen was delivered to the court with the assistance of the US government. The United States co-sponsored the referral of Libya to the ICC. The United States advocated for a referral of Syria.
But there's another factor at play here, and that's Israel. It's one of America's closest allies and is also being investigated for suspected war crimes in Palestine. Like the US, Israel isn't an ICC member, but Palestine is.
So in 2018, the United States Security Advisor John Bolton said that the Palestinian Liberation Organization offices would be closed in Washington, basically as a penalty for pursuing this investigation against Israel.
In fact, earlier this year, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called for sanctions against the court, and he got what he wanted.
First, I want to congratulate President Trump and Secretary Pompeo for their bold leadership in sanctioning the corrupt and biased International Criminal Court. The ICC fabricates outlandish charges against Israel. Shame on them.
The only way that countries can avoid ICC prosecution is if they're investigating themselves. That's what the Afghan government says it's doing. But many in Afghanistan don't trust their own justice system.
Because of the whole weakness of the Afghan government, not having an independent judiciary and lack of capacity.
The US says it's already investigated its military. That happened under President Barack Obama.
The US reported over 600 different investigations, over 250 individuals that were held to account and punished in some way for allegations or for abuses of prisoners that were found to be credible and sustained.
But the court says those investigations haven't gone far enough. International justice is a tricky business. The court's been accused of targeting mostly African suspects. Countries are pulling out to avoid being investigated. And the ICC has no way of enforcing its decisions. It relies on countries to cooperate and hand people over. And then there's its record. In 18 years, it's convicted 4 people. But these are powerful people. Like the Congolese warlord Thomas Lubanga, he was convicted of war crimes for recruiting child soldiers. And the Bosnian Serb military commander Ratko Mladic for the Srebrenica genocide and other crimes. For all its successes and perceived failings, the ICC is still seen by many as important and necessary. Just ask people in Afghanistan.
We know and we are fully aware that it will not be perfect. Afghanistan has been suffering for the past 40 years, and Afghan people have never had any chance of justice and accountability. And for that reason, ICC is the last resort. It should be able to break that vicious cycle of impunity in Afghanistan and bring some sorts of accountability to us.
So are those US sanctions going to work? Well, the ICC says it will carry on doing what it's doing, which is sort of its job, to act independently and resist the most powerful, no matter who they are. If there's a news story you want us to explain on Start Here, get in touch with us on Twitter or Facebook, and make sure to subscribe to Al Jazeera on YouTube so you're up to date with all of our episodes. I'll see you next week.